Imagine being mocked by the most powerful duke in England, in front of the entire court. What if he smirked and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "If you win this match, I'll marry you"? Would you walk away to save your pride? Or would you pick up the bow and aim straight at his future? Because here's the thing, she wasn't trained to perform. She was trained to hit what others call impossible. And when her arrow flies, will it pierce the target or shatter the Duke's icy mask in a way no one can undo? Who is she really? Why is she so calm while the court is ready to watch her fall? And what happens when a promise becomes a cage for him? If you love dangerous romance, ruthless aristocrats, and a heroine who never bows, you're in the right place. Before we begin, hit subscribe because this story gets wild. Like the video if you're ready for a duke to lose control, and share it with a friend who lives for scandal, slow burn tension, and poetic revenge. Now, breathe in, feel that cold English fog, because the match is about to start, and only one of them will walk away unchanged. The fog that morning was not the gentle kind that softens hedgerows and makes the world forgiving. It clung to Ashbourne's grounds like a judgment, cold against the throat, beading on lashes, tasting faintly of iron and rain. Somewhere beyond the clipped yews, a carriage wheel hissed through wet gravel. Somewhere closer, silk whispered, skirts brushing damp grass, sleeves shifting as ladies leaned in, hungry for a spectacle dressed as sport. They had come for amusement. They had come to watch a girl be placed back into her proper size. At the center of the lawn, the target waited at an indecent distance, a pale circle pinned to a post that looked smaller than a coin through the veil of mist. The ribbon tied around it fluttered like a taunt. Even the air seemed to know it was absurd. The court did not. The court only knew cruelty when it was offered with a smile, and the Duke of Ashbourne was smiling, not warmly, not kindly. The expression belonged to statues and executioners, beautiful, fixed, untroubled. His coat was dark as wet ink, his gloves immaculate, his presence so absolute that conversation quieted without a command. Men made room. Women lowered their eyes, then peeked again, as if drawn to the edge of a blade. He turned his gaze to Lady Alara Wycliffe and measured her the way he might measure a purchase. Weight, worth, weakness. Alara did not lower her eyes. There was no tremble in her posture, no flutter of submission. She stood with her chin slightly lifted, as if the cold could not touch her unless she granted it permission. A few strands of hair had slipped loose near her temple, damp with fog. She did not tuck them back. She did not tidy herself for their comfort. Whispers slithered through the gathering. Wycliffe, ruined, stubborn, unwise. A lady should not handle weapons. A lady should not invite attention. A lady should be grateful for silence. Ashbourne stepped closer, and the scent of sandalwood and something sharper, like crushed cedar, cut through the wet air. His voice arrived soft and certain, the kind of sound that made people lean in because they feared missing it. "You've insisted on participating," he said, as if she had begged. "Very well, we shall make it memorable." A ripple of laughter, restrained and polished, moved through the onlookers. Alara's eyes did not soften. "Memorable for whom, Your Grace?" His smile deepened by a fraction, dangerous in its restraint. "For you." He lifted the bow in his hand with effortless familiarity, then let it drop into the space between them, as if tossing down a gauntlet. The gesture was theatrical, and the court adored him for it. He glanced toward the target, So far away it seemed to belong to another estate entirely, then back to her, gaze bright with mockery. A pause, perfect in its cruelty. "If you win this match," the Duke said, voice carrying through fog and silk and waiting mouths, "I'll marry you." Silence struck harder than any shout. It was the kind of quiet that made reputations shatter. Ilara's breath did not hitch. Her expression did not fracture. Only her eyes changed, darkening, sharpening, as if some private door inside her had closed and locked. A promise, spoken before witnesses, was not a jest. It was a trap. It was a chain offered as entertainment. The Duke expected her to blush, to rage, to retreat. Instead, Ilara stepped forward and took the bow. Her fingers settled along the polished wood with a familiarity that did not belong to a sheltered debutante. The string, cool and taut, kissed her skin. She lifted her gaze to the impossible circle in the distance, and her mouth curved, small, fearless, almost amused. The court leaned in, smelling blood. Ashbourne watched her as one watches a storm forming on the horizon, certain it will break somewhere else. Ilara drew the string back until it sang. And in that single, suspended heartbeat, before the arrow was loosed, Ashbourne felt it. Not doubt, not yet, but the faintest crack in certainty. Like ice answering a distant thunder, before Ashbourne's fog-laced grounds became a stage for vows and ridicule, Lady Ilara Wycliffe belonged to quieter places. Quiet not because they were gentle, but because they were forbidden. Her family's townhouse smelled of polished oak and old money trying to pretend it had not begun to rot. Servants moved more carefully than they used to. Candles were burned down to their last stubborn wick. Even the mirrors seemed to look away, as though ashamed to reflect a name that had started to slip in the hierarchy of whispers. Ilara had grown up listening to the language of survival spoken between teacups. Debts disguised as temporary inconveniences. Invitations weighed like currency. Relatives who smiled too brightly while measuring how far the Wycliffes had fallen. In drawing rooms, she learned to read pauses the way others read print. In hallways, she learned which doors were suddenly closed. And outside, where damp earth clung to boot leather and rain carried a clean, metallic bite, she learned something far more dangerous than etiquette. The bow had found her like a secret confession, not an ornament for a fashionable pastime, but a discipline, a kind of truth that did not care about titles. The string did not flatter, the target did not pity. There was only breath, tension, release, consequence. It was the one thing in her world that could not be bargained down by cruel smiles. Ashbourne's world, by contrast, did not bargain at all. It claimed. The Duke moved through London like a force the city had agreed not to resist. His name opened doors and sealed fates with the same ease. Men who considered themselves powerful still found themselves adjusting their tone when he entered. Women spoke of him in careful syllables, as if saying too much might summon him. His estate was not merely land, it was influence made tangible. Leases, patronage, marriages arranged with a gentleman's handwriting and a tyrant's precision. They called him disciplined. They meant untouchable. Yet Ilara had watched untouchable men up close. She had seen how quickly a reputation could be strangled, how a family could be starved without a single public accusation. The aristocracy did not need daggers. It had invitations, omissions, polite laughter, and there was Lady Seraphina Vale. Seraphina's sweetness was a weapon dipped in honey. She smiled the way lace pretends to be harmless while it tightens. She had glided into the season as though she were born already crowned, and people adored her for it, adoration that came with obedience. Where Ilara's defiance unsettled, Seraphina's charm soothed. Where Ilara refused to be shaped, Seraphina offered herself as the perfect shape for a duke's arm, a duke's crest, a duke's future. Ilara did not need to be told what Seraphina wanted. Ashbourne's name had been circling the Vale household like a hawk. A match, they whispered. A triumph. A consolidation of power so neat it made mothers sigh and fathers calculate. And the Wycliffes, already limping, were simply in the way. Ilara tasted rain in the air, and something darker beneath it. Sandalwood from an old letter sealed too tightly. The kind of perfume that clung to threats delivered with courtesy. She stood at her bedroom window, listening to the city's distant carriage wheels and the nearer hush of her mother's restrained worry. Her family was being pressed, quietly, relentlessly, toward collapse. And Ashbourne, whether he knew it or not, stood at the center of the vice. So when the invitation arrived, edged in guilt and expectation, Ilara did not feel gratitude. She felt a challenge being placed into her hands like a blade. And she decided, with a calm that surprised even her, that if the Duke of Ashbourne intended to make a sport of her, she would make a reckoning of him. The ballroom at Langford House breathed heat beneath its chandeliers, a bright strain of music threading through perfume and ambition. Every laugh sounded rehearsed, every compliment measured. Silk slid over polished floors like a tide that never reached the shore. Ilara moved through it with a steadiness that made people stare twice, once to appraise, once to disapprove. She felt their attention like cold pins at her spine. The Wycliffe name still opened doors, but now it did so with a pause, as though the latch might change its mind. The season was a theatre that punished hesitation, and Ilara refused to play the part of a frightened girl waiting for rescue. Then the air shifted. It happened without announcement, without a herald's call, simply the subtle turning of heads, the thinning of conversation, the quietening of smiles. The Duke of Ashbourne entered the room the way winter enters a house, uninvited, undeniable, immediately obeyed. His presence drew a line through the crowd. People stepped back from it as if it might burn. Ilara did not step back. His gaze found her with the precision of a thrown knife. He crossed the floor with unhurried certainty, stopping too close, an intentional trespass disguised as civility. The scent of sandalwood rose around him, warm beneath the sharp edge of rain still clinging to his coat. "Lady Wycliffe," he said, voice low enough to feel private, despite the audience that instantly formed around them. "I'm told you've developed interests." Ilara's mouth curved slightly. "I'm told you've developed opinions." A flicker, almost invisible, passed through his eyes. Amusement, yes, but also something like irritation that she had met him on equal footing. His smile sharpened, elegant and predatory. "You mistake boldness for strength," he murmured. "You mistake silence for surrender," she answered, and held his stare until the space between them felt charged, as though the air itself were holding a breath. He tilted his head. "You're fond of fighting." "I'm fond of truth," Ilara said. "Fighting is simply what happens when others dislike it." A soft sound, half laugh, half warning, left him. "Truth is a luxury." Ilara's eyes did not waver. "Then you've been hoarding it." The circle around them tightened. Someone's fan snapped open with a nervous little crack. Seraphina Vale was nearby, draped in satin and sweetness, watching with the still attention of a spider sensing vibration on its web. Ashbourne extended his hand, not a request, a claim, polished into a gesture the room would interpret as generosity. "Dance," he said. Elara looked at his hand as though it were an offer of shackles. "Is that an order, Your Grace?" she asked softly. His fingers remained steady, but his jaw tightened by a fraction. "It is an invitation." Elara placed her hand in his. The contact was brief, electric, and she felt the shock in him as well, the surprise of resistance that did not flinch. He drew her into the pattern of the music, and for a moment the world seemed to arrange itself around their steps. He tried to lead with the authority of habit, expecting her to yield. Elara followed only when she chose. Their bodies moved with perfect outward harmony, while their words cut beneath it. "You enjoy provoking me," he said, a breath against her ear. "I enjoy surviving you," she replied. His hold tightened. Not enough to bruise, enough to remind her who he believed he was. Elara did not soften. She smiled as if she could taste his arrogance and found it bitter. "You'll regret this," he murmured. Elara's gaze lifted, calm as a drawn bowstring. "So will you." And as the music swelled, Serafina's smile remained fixed, yet something in her eyes hardened, as if she had just decided that Elara Wycliffe could no longer be allowed to stand. The invitation arrived sealed in guilt and implication, as though the paper itself expected obedience. Ashbourne's crest stared up from the wax, an animal caught mid-strike, jaws parted over an empty crown. Elara held it between her fingers and felt, absurdly, the weight of it, not because it was precious, but because it was a summons disguised as courtesy. By the time she reached Ashbourne's grounds, the morning had turned metallic with damp. The air carried the clean sting of rain and the darker undertone of expensive cologne drifting from clustered coats. Voices travelled in little knots, laughter sharpened by the knowledge that someone would be sacrificed for entertainment. Serafina Vale moved among them like a blessing everyone agreed to worship. Her smile was soft, her words softer, and yet they landed with the precision of stones placed on a grave. "Lady Wycliffe," Serafina said, sweetly loud. "How refreshing to see you among outdoor pursuits. One forgets how adventurous some ladies become when they've nothing left to lose." Polite laughter rippled, trained and hungry. Elara tasted the cruelty beneath it, like bitter tea. "Adventure is only scandal when a woman enjoys it," Elara replied, her tone mild enough to pass as charm. "How fortunate you are to be admired for doing neither." A pause, then more laughter, nervous this time, because Serafina's eyes had gone brighter, colder. Ashbourne appeared as if the conversation had been arranged to summon him. He stood just beyond Elara's shoulder, close enough for sandalwood to cut through the wet air, close enough for her to sense the edge of his attention. He did not look at Serafina first. He looked at Elara, and the faint curve of his mouth suggested he had been waiting for this moment, waiting to watch her squirm. "You've caused a stir," he murmured. "I'm merely standing," Elara said. "It seems the world does the rest." His gaze drifted past her toward the field where attendants were arranging a target at an outrageous distance. A ribbon was tied to it, fluttering like mockery. The placement was not an accident. Nothing here ever was. Serafina stepped nearer, voice honeyed, eyes lit with cruelty that wore politeness like lace. "Perhaps the Duke might indulge us," she suggested. "A friendly match. A demonstration of skill. After all, His Grace is known for excellence, and Lady Wycliffe is known for daring." The word daring was spoken the way one says improper. Ashbourne's attention sharpened. Elara felt it, the shift of his interest from boredom to sport. He was a man accustomed to control, and control required proving itself in public. "A match," he repeated, as though tasting the idea. Yes, that would be instructive. Instructive, Elara echoed, and the corner of her mouth lifted. For whom? His eyes flickered. For a heartbeat. Something almost like irritation stirred there, then was sealed again beneath the polished ice. He accepted the bow with casual mastery, loosing an easy shot that struck true and earned immediate applause. The court adored certainty. They always did. Then he turned, offering the weapon as though it were a toy. Your turn, Lady Wycliffe. Elara took it. Feeling the hush thicken, she sensed how they wanted her to fail, how the aristocracy fed on the collapse of anyone who dared stand too upright. Seraphina's voice drifted, light as a feather, heavy as a verdict. Surely she wouldn't refuse, unless she fears she's all talk. Ashbourne's smile returned, slow, deliberate, a blade drawn for pleasure. And then he said it, loud enough for every witness to become a chain. If you win this match, the Duke mocked, I'll marry you. The words struck the air and did not dissipate. They hung there, alive, turning every face into a courtroom. Elara's fingers tightened on the bow, not with panic, but with decision. She looked at the impossible target, then back at the Duke, and her voice came out calm as falling rain. Very well, she said. Stand there and watch what you've promised. The moment after a promise is spoken aloud is never truly silent. It is crowded with consequences. Elara felt them pressing in from every side. The court's anticipation, Seraphina's gleaming patience, the Duke's certainty that this would end in laughter at her expense. The bow in her hands was cool and steady, the string humming faintly beneath her fingers like a restrained oath. She drew, not to impress them, not to plead for a place among them. She drew as if her body remembered a truth their world could not rewrite. Breath in, shoulders quiet. The distant target narrowed in her mind until it was no longer impossible, only precise. Then a sound split the air, sharp, wrong. A horse startled nearby, hooves churning wet ground, a sudden flare of chaos that broke the court's careful poise. Voices rose. Silk snapped. Someone swore under their breath, with the panic of forgetting they were polished. Elara's arrow did not fly. Her hand loosened instinctively, lowering the bow as bodies shifted. A small storm of concern gathering around one figure, the Duke. He moved too quickly, as if refusing to acknowledge the danger even as it reached for him. The horse reared, the world jolted, and Ashbourne's balance betrayed him for a single humiliating second. Boots sliding, breath catching, a sharp impact swallowed by the fog. When he stood again, his posture remained proud, but his right hand was wrong, held too still. Fingers tightened as though pain were a secret he intended to keep. Elara saw it anyway. A duke could hide discomfort behind etiquette, but pain had its own language, and she had grown fluent in it. Before anyone else could close around him with questions and pity, Elara stepped forward, voice low. "Come," she said, not asking. Ashbourne's eyes flashed, offended by the idea of being guided. "I am not." "You are injured," Elara cut in, her tone sharper than the drizzle. "And if you bleed pride in front of them, they will drink it." That struck something. Not gratitude, never that, but recognition that she understood the court's cruelty as intimately as he did. He allowed her near, as if allowing a sin. Elara took his arm without ceremony and led him away from the clustered murmurs, away from Seraphina's sharpened gaze. The fog thickened as they moved, dampening sound until the world became a private chamber made of mist and breath. They stopped where the air carried the scent of wet earth and bruised greenery, where rain gathered on leaves and fell in slow, deliberate drops. Ashbourne pulled his arm free, jaw set. "You presume?" he said, voice tight. "I observe," Elara replied, "and I refuse to be entertained by your stubbornness." His laugh came out rougher than before. "You speak to me as though you are my equal." Elara's gaze lifted, unflinching. "If you require someone smaller to feel large, Your Grace, you were never large at all." For a heartbeat, something in him faltered, an almost imperceptible fracture in the ice. He flexed his hand, and the wince that slipped across his face was so quick it might have been imagined, except Elara watched too closely to be fooled. Her voice softened, not into submission, but into precision. "Let me see." "No." "That is not an answer," Elara said, stepping closer. "It is a habit." He stared at her as if she were a doorway he had not meant to open. The scent of sandalwood rose with his breath, warm against the rain-cold air. When he finally spoke, it was quieter, edged with something dangerous. "If you touch me," he murmured, "you will learn what it costs to do so." Elara did not retreat. She held his gaze like a held arrow. "Then," she said, "stop pretending you don't want to be known." His hand lifted, hesitated, then caught her wrist, not cruelly, but with a force that betrayed how close he was to losing control. And in the space between their breaths, Ashbourne's voice dropped into something raw. "You have no idea," he said, "what you're awakening." Ashbourne released her wrist as if the act had scorched him, the space between them abruptly colder for the warmth that had almost happened. Elara steadied her breath and turned away before the court could feel the shift in her pulse, before anyone could taste the danger that had flashed in his eyes. When they returned, the world had resumed its hunger. The match could not be postponed without feeding scandal, so it was postponed with smiles. The Duke's injury became a momentary inconvenience. Elara's presence became a charming eccentricity. Serafina's laughter flowed like champagne, bright, sweet, and poisonous. She offered concern with such exquisite timing that it felt rehearsed. "My poor Duke," she sighed, for the benefit of listening ears. "How dreadfully unfortunate. But at least we are spared an embarrassment." Elara met her gaze. "Embarrassment is only spared when it belongs to someone else." Serafina's smile held, her eyes did not. "Careful, Lady Wycliffe. Some women mistake defiance for protection, and some women mistake perfume for virtue," Elara replied softly. That night, Elara returned to the townhouse and found her mother standing too still by the mantel, a letter trembling in her hand as if the paper had teeth. The wax seal was unfamiliar, black, embossed with a crest Elara had seen only once, years ago, on a document her father had tried to burn. A beast mid-strike. Ashbourne. Her mother's voice was thin. "It arrived by special messenger." Elara took the letter and felt the old dread rise, sharp, involuntary. The scent of sandalwood clung faintly to the parchment, threaded with rain. Inside were lines written with perfect restraint, a reminder of debts, a warning against public impropriety, a suggestion that certain leases could be revoked with a signature. No threats, no vulgarity, just the elegant certainty of a man accustomed to ending lives without ever raising his voice. But what froze Elara was not the message. It was the date referenced at the bottom, and the name of the steward attached to it. a name that had belonged to the man who once managed her father's accounts, the same man who had disappeared the week the Wycliffes began to fall. Ilara's pulse turned steady in a way that frightened even her. She crossed to her father's old desk, unlocked a drawer she had not dared open in months, and drew out the remnants of a ledger, pages torn, edges browned, ink smudged as though someone had tried to erase a truth too late. She traced the columns until her fingers found it, a property transferred, a debt settled, a signature recorded in a shorthand that matched the Duke's crest. Ashbourne had been there. In the beginning, not as a rumour, not as a distant power, as a hand that moved the first stone. A memory surfaced, her father, pale with fury, whispering of a man who does not forgive, a man who collects what he is owed. Ilara had been younger then, too angry to understand the shape of the trap closing around them. Now she understood, and it was not only Ashbourne's name in the shadow. Another seal had been pressed into the ledger's margin, smaller, feminine, a crest of roses entwined around a blade. Vale. Seraphina had not simply circled Ashbourne's world, she had been feeding it, perhaps for years. Ilara folded the new letter with slow care and placed it beside the old ledger, as if setting two pieces of a blade together. Her chest did not tighten with despair, it tightened with purpose. Because if the Duke had cut her family without remembering her name, then the promise he had made in public was no longer a joke. It was leverage, and Seraphina's web, so perfect, so admired, had finally revealed its threads. Ilara lifted her gaze to the dark window, where rain slid like tears down the glass, and made herself a vow that tasted like steel. If Ashbourne wanted to play with fate, she would teach him what it meant to lose control. And if Seraphina Vale thought she had already won, Ilara would make sure her victory tasted like ash. London did not sleep. It merely changed masks. By the time the next gathering began, the air itself seemed to have learned Ilara's name, whispering it through corridors, pressing it into gloved palms, folding it into laughter that sounded too bright. The Duke's promise had not faded. It had ripened. Every tongue in society worried it like a sore tooth. Ilara arrived with her spine straight and her expression calm, as though she had never been anyone's entertainment. Yet beneath that calm, the ledger's ink still burned behind her eyes. Ashbourne's crest, Vale's roses around a blade. The shape of betrayal was no longer a theory. It was a map. Ashbourne found her before she could choose a corner to stand in. He did not approach like a suitor. He approached like consequence. "You've been avoiding me," he said softly. Ilara's gaze lifted, unflinching. "I've been breathing. It's difficult to do that near you." A muscle in his jaw tightened, as though he resented how quickly she reached under his skin. "Careful." "Is that concern?" Ilara murmured. "Or command?" His eyes darkened. "It is a warning." Ilara leaned in just enough to make the space between them feel dangerous. Warnings are for those who fear what happens next. I don't. For a moment, his composure wavered, not in his posture, not in his voice, but in something deeper, something that flashed and vanished like lightning behind clouds. He smelled of sandalwood and rain, and the warmth of it against the cold edge of his restraint made her throat tighten. "You think you can provoke me and walk away untouched," he said. "I think," Ilara replied, "that you're used to women who soften when you look at them." His smile was thin. "And you are not one of them." "No," she said, and let the word hang like a dare. "I am not." The corridor was narrower here, lined with old tapestries that swallowed sound and made secrets feel louder. Somewhere beyond, music swelled, and laughter rose and fell like a tide. But between Alara and Ashbourne there was only a taut silence, stretched tight as bowstring. His hand lifted, not quite touching her cheek, hovering near enough that she felt heat where there should have been cold. It was not tenderness, it was restraint, battling desire, discipline, fighting instinct. His voice dropped, rougher at the edges. "What do you want from me, Alara?" She heard her name on his tongue and felt the shock of it like a bruise blooming. "The truth," she said, "and the courage to live with it." A faint, humorless laugh escaped him. "Truth ruins people." "Only the people who deserve ruin," Alara answered. His gaze moved to her mouth, then back to her eyes, as if he hated that his body betrayed him. The air seemed to tighten, thick with the promise of contact. Alara's pulse stayed steady by sheer will. "If you keep standing this close," Ashbourne murmured, "you will force me to choose." Alara's voice was soft, merciless. "Choose, then." The space between them shrank to a breath. His fingers brushed her wrist, barely there, yet the touch landed like a claim. He inhaled, slow, as though taking her into himself. "I could end you," he said, and the words sounded like confession rather than threat. Alara did not flinch. "And yet you haven't." His eyes held hers, wild beneath the polished surface. "Because if I start," he whispered, "I won't stop." And then, just as the moment threatened to become irreversible, footsteps approached. Too close, too soon, dragging the world back like a door thrown open. Ashbourne's hand fell away, but his gaze stayed locked on Alara's, possessive in a way he could not disguise. "You will not be destroyed," he said, low and absolute. "Not while I'm watching." Alara's heart did not soften, it sharpened, because she understood the danger of that vow and the hunger behind it better than anyone in the room. The rumor did not arrive as a single blow. It seeped in, polite and patient, like damp into stone. By morning, it had found every drawing room, every teacup, every mouth eager to taste disgrace. By afternoon, it had become truth simply because enough people repeated it with the right expression. They said Lady Alara Wycliffe had ensnared the Duke of Ashbourne. They said her skill with a bow was not skill at all, but an indecent trick learned in secret places with secret men. They said she'd been seen alone, too often, too boldly. They said she was reckless, desperate, improper. Every word sharpened to carve her into something the court could punish without guilt. And at the center of it stood Seraphina Vale, smiling as if innocence were stitched into her lips. Alara walked into the evening's gathering with her head high, though the air tasted sour, as if even the perfume had turned against her. Conversations thinned as she passed. Eyes followed. Fans fluttered with the nervous energy of people thrilled to watch her fall. Then the laughter began. Not loud at first, never loud at first. A small sound here, a whisper there, the sudden hush when she came too near. A woman she had once greeted warmly looked through her as though Alara were smoke. A gentleman offered a bow that stopped a fraction too early, the gesture becoming an insult without breaking etiquette. Alara's hands remained steady, her pulse remained measured. She had lived with quiet cruelty long enough to recognize its shape. She saw Ashbourne across the room. He stood among men who watched him as though his approval were oxygen. His posture was perfect, his expression unreadable, the familiar mask of ice restored so completely that it might have been carved into his skin. If the rumor had reached him, he gave no sign, If it had angered him, he concealed it behind restraint so flawless it looked like indifference. Alara moved closer, driven by a need she despised: confirmation, not comfort, not rescue, only truth. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, something flickered in his gaze. Heat, conflict, a warning he could not speak aloud. Then it vanished, replaced by the Duke the world trusted, controlled, distant, untouchable. A voice carried near them, sweet with false concern. How dreadful, Serafina sighed, for those who needed to hear it. To think a lady would gamble her virtue so openly, one wonders what she hoped to gain. Someone laughed. Someone agreed. Someone said the word shameless, as if it were a prayer. Alara kept her gaze on Ashbourne, refusing to acknowledge Serafina's bait. "Tell them," Alara said quietly, the words shaped like steel. "Tell them it's a lie." Ashbourne's jaw tightened. His eyes did not leave hers. But when he spoke, his voice was careful, too careful. "This is not the place," he murmured. The sentence was not a refusal. It was worse. It was distance disguised as prudence. It was the Duke choosing the court over her, choosing stability over justice, choosing silence because silence was safer for him. Alara felt the blow land, deep and clean, not because she had believed in his protection, but because she had seen the truth in his near touch, the hunger in his voice, the vow he had almost made with his eyes. And now, in front of witnesses, he locked it all away as if she had imagined it. Serafina's smile brightened, triumphant in its politeness. Alara turned slowly, letting the room see her face, calm, unsmiling, unbroken. She lifted her chin and let the whispers strike her without drawing blood. "If you wish to be entertained," she said, voice clear enough to travel, "you will have your sport." A hush fell, greedy and immediate. Alara's gaze swept the crowd, then returned to Ashbourne like an arrow finding its mark. "I accept the final match," she said, "and when I win, the promise spoken before you all will be kept." The room shuddered with anticipation. Across the distance, Ashbourne's mask held, until his eyes betrayed him, just once, with something sharp and panicked, as if he had suddenly realized what it meant to lose control of the story. The final match tasted of thunder before the sky confessed it. Rain threatened in the air, sharp, metallic, while the court gathered with the reverent hunger of people about to witness a ruin. Alara stood where they could all see her, spine straight, hands calm, as though the gossip had never reached her skin. If her heart beat hard, it beat for herself alone. The target waited at its obscene distance, pale as a dare. The ribbon tied to it flickered in the breeze like a mocking tongue. Ashbourne was there, of course, motionless, immaculate, eyes darker than the clouds. His injury had become another secret sealed behind elegance. His promise, however, could not be sealed. Not after it had been spoken before witnesses who survived on scandal the way others survived on bread. Alara felt Serafina's attention like a cold fingertip at the nape of her neck. Serafina did not look triumphant. She looked certain, as if she already held the ending and was merely waiting for the world to arrive at it. A murmur rose. A lady with a bow, a duke with a vow, a court hungry for punishment. "Begin," someone said, softly, like a prayer for blood. Alara lifted the bow. The wood rested against her palm like an old truth. The string, cool and taut, greeted her fingers with a familiar sting. She drew in a breath that tasted of rain and steady rage. In her mind, the court dissolved. The whispers dissolved. Even Ashbourne's gaze became only pressure. Present, undeniable, irrelevant. She drew the string back until the world narrowed to a single point. There was a pause, the kind that makes time feel breakable. Then Alara released. The arrow left her with a sound like silk tearing, swift and certain. It flew through mist and judgment, cutting a clean line across everything they believed about her. For a heartbeat, no one moved, as if the court had forgotten how bodies worked. Then the ribbon on the target shuddered. A sharp, stunned silence slammed down. Not polite, not curated. Real. The sort of silence that terrifies those who prefer their cruelty predictable. Alara lowered the bow with the calm of someone who had never doubted herself. She turned her face toward the Duke, eyes steady as a blade laid flat on a table. Ashbourne did not smile. Something inside him broke loose. It was not gentle. It was not controlled. His gaze locked on Alara as if she were the only thing in the world that could make him breathe. And he moved, fast enough to startle the crowd, decisive enough to silence every tongue. He crossed the space between them, as though the court were nothing but furniture. When he reached her, he took her hand, gloveless, bare contact, a breach of etiquette so blatant it felt like a declaration of war. "Enough," Ashbourne said, and the word carried like a command carved into stone. The court froze. He turned, still holding Alara, and faced the gathering with eyes that no longer bothered to hide their heat. "I made a promise," he said, voice low, dangerous in its steadiness, "and I will keep it." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Seraphina's smile sharpened. "Your Grace," she began, sweetly. "Surely you wouldn't bind yourself to—" Ashbourne cut her off without even looking at her. "To the only person here with courage," he said. Then his gaze dropped to Alara, and the ice in his face cracked fully, revealing something fierce and unguarded beneath. "I will marry you," he said, clearly, so there could be no twisting of it. Not as a jest, not as a spectacle, as my choice. Alara did not soften, but her fingers tightened once around his. A single pulse of acknowledgement. Behind them, Seraphina inhaled, small, controlled, and Alara felt it. The shift, the last weapon being raised. Seraphina's voice floated out, honeyed and lethal. "Then allow me to present what I've been forced to conceal," she said. "A matter that will make this marriage impossible." Seraphina's concealment arrived in her hands as a neat bundle of papers, tied with ribbon the color of dried roses. She held it with a tremor so delicate it looked like virtue. Her eyes were bright, almost tender, as if she pitied the room for what it was about to learn. "I did not wish to wound anyone," she said softly, and the lie was dressed in lace. "But a duke's marriage is not a private indulgence. It is a matter of blood, honor, and truth." The court leaned forward, starving. Ashbourne's grip on Alara's hand tightened, not to restrain her, but to anchor himself. "Speak plainly," he said, voice like a blade drawn slow. Seraphina turned her gaze to Alara with practiced sorrow. "Lady Wycliffe has been instructed," she murmured, "by a man who was banished for impropriety, a man whose name should never again be spoken in decent society, and there are letters, proof that their meetings were not as innocent as she pretends." A collective breath shivered through silk and etiquette. The accusation was designed to be unanswerable, designed to make Alara defend her dignity while everyone measured the shape of her shame. Elara did not flinch. She released Ashbourne's hand and stepped forward, not away. The air tasted of rain and sandalwood, and beneath it, something sharper. Ink, old fear, the bitter familiarity of traps. "You're right," Elara said calmly. "A duke's marriage is not private. That is why you chose this stage. That is why you brought your ribboned lies." Serafina's smile held. Lies. Elara's eyes did not leave hers. "If you wanted to ruin me, you should have chosen a weaker opponent." A ripple passed through the crowd. Half outrage, half awe, Elara lifted her chin. "Yes, I was instructed, not in seduction, in discipline, in distance, in aim. Because when a family is strangled quietly, a girl learns quickly that tears are useless." Serafina's gaze sharpened. How tragic, how convenient. Elara turned slightly, letting her voice carry. "Convenient would be pretending I did not know who tightened the rope around my family's throat." The court stilled. Names were dangerous. Accusations were poison unless one had the antidote. Elara reached into her reticule and drew out a folded ledger page. Aged, smudged, but unmistakably real. The paper looked ordinary. The truth inside it did not. "This," Elara said, "is the first cut. The transfer that began our ruin. The debt that was settled without our consent. And here," her finger traced the ink with merciless precision, "is Ashbourne's crest." A murmur rose, shocked and uncertain. Ashbourne's face did not change, but his eyes did, darkening with recognition, with memory pulled from a locked room. "That steward," he said under his breath, and the words sounded like a curse. Elara nodded once. "You didn't destroy us for sport," she said, voice steady. "You did it because someone fed you a story and made it profitable." Serafina's breath caught, tiny, betraying. "This is absurd," she said quickly. "A desperate woman waving old scraps." "Old scraps." Elara's tone remained calm, which made it more lethal. "Then you won't mind when we compare them to your handwriting." Serafina's composure faltered for the first time. A hairline crack. Ashbourne stepped forward, and the air changed around him. The Duke's power was not loud, it was absolute. "Bring my solicitor," he said, voice like winter deciding. "Now!" The court shifted, frightened by the sudden taste of consequence. Serafina's smile trembled. "Your Grace, you can't possibly—" "I can," Ashbourne said, eyes fixed on Serafina with a cold clarity that made her go pale. "Because I finally understand what you've been selling me." Elara's voice cut through the tightening hush. "Her letters will match the seal in the ledger," she said. "Her lies will match the debts. Her sweetness will match the blade." Serafina stepped back, too graceful to run, but her eyes began to dart like a trapped animal's. "You'll regret this," she whispered, venom slipping through the lace. Elara's expression did not change. "Regret is for people who hesitate." Ashbourne turned to the gathering, his voice carrying with the ease of command. "Lady Serafina Vale has abused my name to ruin families, forge leverage, and weaponize reputation," he said. "From this moment, she is cut off from my patronage, my protection, and every door my title opens." The court did what it always did when power shifted. It followed it. Serafina stood suddenly alone, her perfume meaningless without an audience to worship it. The roses on her ribbon looked dull. The blade beneath them had been seen. Rain finally began to fall, soft at first, then steadier, washing the lawn darkening the earth, cleansing nothing but making everything smell sharper, truer. Elara breathed it in and felt something inside her unclench. Ashbourne stepped to her side again, close enough that his warmth met the rain-cold air around her. "I owe you more than a promise," he said quietly. Elara's gaze slid to him, challenging even now. "Don't offer me ownership, Your Grace." His mouth curved, not mocking this time, but honest. "I wouldn't dare." He held out the bow, not like a trophy, but like respect made tangible. Elara took it, fingers steady, and for the first time the court saw it clearly. She was not being raised into his world as a rescued girl. She was remaking it. Ashbourne's voice dropped, meant only for her. "Will you marry me, Elara Wycliffe?" Elara looked at him as rain traced the line of his jaw, as sandalwood and storm wrapped around them, as the Duke's mask lay shattered at her feet, and she smiled, slow and unafraid. "Yes," she said, "but understand this in front of them all.